What's up, everyone? Tony from the Cold Case Project, back again. And today, what I want to run with you over is all content shared in these videos is readily available in any Google search. Now, with that said, I take this content, have it rewritten, and upon rewriting it, put it in these videos to spread the word on the thousands and thousands of cold cases of men and women throughout the United States that are just forgotten, and I give this platform to them so their cases and their stories can be told. Now, in addition to that, if you look down below in the description, you're going to see some brand new t-shirt and coffee cup designs I've actually gotten from a couple of my subscribers who have over the years have been giving me some awesome fan art. So with that said, I'm offering a 20% discount code down below if you check that out, and splitting proceeds with them because they are awesome. Been watching me for quite some time, and I definitely think they deserve to be rewarded for some of the work they do on top of being full-time employees also. So once again, if you have any recommendations or any suggestions, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the video. Like, subscribe. I'm out. Peace.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, February 17th, 1993. It was a gray, chilly morning in the city, with the kind of quiet that falls over residential streets on a weekday when most people are at work or school. In the parking lot of the Cherry Hill apartment complex, something was about to happen, something that would spark a decades-long mystery. Tracy Samuels, 30 years old and a mother of two, was last seen that day getting out of her own vehicle, a dark blue 1988 GMC extended cab pickup truck, and stepping into another. Witnesses reported the vehicle was either a Chevrolet or GMC flatbed pickup, older in style and dusty, as though it had been driven down rural roads. The man behind the wheel was white, with brown hair, a mustache, and wearing a baseball cap. Tracy appeared hesitant. Observers later told investigators she seemed reluctant to get into the vehicle, almost as if she knew she shouldn't, but she climbed in anyway. Moments later, the truck pulled away. That would be the last confirmed sighting of Tracy Samuels. What happened next has remained an unsolved mystery for more than 30 years. Tracy wasn't some wayward soul. She was a mother. She lived with her husband and two young children in Glenpool, a quiet suburb of Tulsa known for its close-knit community. That morning, she dropped her kids off with their grandparents around 11 a.m., saying she had a job interview scheduled later that day. But she didn't say what kind of job it was or where it was supposed to take place. She simply said she'd be back later. She never returned. When Tracy failed to check in or come home, her family grew increasingly concerned. The following evening at 10:30 p.m. on February 18th, the day after she was last seen, her GMC truck was found abandoned at another apartment complex on South Jackson Avenue, about 6 miles away. The keys were gone. Tracy was nowhere in sight. As the police began digging into her life, a more complex picture began to emerge. Tracy and her husband were reportedly involved with cocaine at the time of her disappearance. There were whispers of dangerous acquaintances and drug debts. Rumors that she had been carrying a large amount of cash that day, possibly tied to a drug-related errand or payoff. But those were just rumors. Nothing concrete ever emerged. Even with that knowledge, Tracy's parents insisted she was not the type to disappear voluntarily, especially not without contacting her children. She made plans to celebrate her daughter's birthday, which was only a few days away. She never would have missed it, they said. She was a devoted mother, even amid personal turmoil. Something had happened to her, something she hadn't planned. In the months before her disappearance, Tracy's life had grown increasingly unstable. She was reportedly trying to turn a corner, possibly looking for legitimate work to distance herself from the darker aspects of her and her husband's lifestyle. Whether the job interview she mentioned was real or a cover story remains unknown. The fact that she left her children in someone else's care suggests she planned to come back. But what exactly happened between 11 a.m. and the moment she was seen stepping into that other truck remains a mystery. Investigators believe foul play was involved. There's no indication that Tracy ran off willingly or staged her disappearance. One of the most troubling details is that she was seen reluctantly getting into the truck. That hesitation was enough for police to theorize she may have been forced into the vehicle or coerced. And the man driving? To this day, he has never been identified. No one knows his name, his connection to Tracy, or what happened after they drove away. The Tulsa and Glenpool police departments both took on the case, coordinating efforts as leads trickled in over the years. Detectives tried to track the movements of known associates, followed up on tips about drug deals gone wrong, and even interviewed inmates who claimed to have heard things about what happened to Tracy. Still, none of it led to answers. Some theories suggest that Tracy was silenced due to knowledge she had about certain criminal activities, while others believe she may have been involved in a deal or situation that turned violent. There's also the possibility that someone close to her, someone she knew and trusted, lured her away under false pretenses. Her abandoned truck gave up no obvious clues, no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints leading to a suspect. Just a woman gone, a vehicle dumped, and a trail that went cold far too quickly. As of today, Tracy Samuels remains missing. There have been no confirmed sightings, no suspects identified, and no arrests made. Foul play is strongly suspected, but without a body or clear witness statements, the investigation remains stalled. The man in the flatbed truck, believed to be the last person to see her alive, remains unidentified. Police urge anyone with information to come forward, even anonymously. Tracy Samuels was 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighed approximately 130 pounds, and had brown hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing casual clothing suitable for a job interview. She would be in her 60s today. If you know anything about the disappearance of Tracy Samuels, please contact the Tulsa Police Department or your local law enforcement agency. On the warm spring afternoon of April 24th, 1978, 41-year-old Kenneth Sumner pulled into the small town of Girty, Oklahoma, a quiet dot on the map tucked among the rolling hills and back roads of Hughes County. It was a rural town like many in southeastern Oklahoma, quiet, remote, a place where the land was wide and the neighbors were few. Girty was familiar ground for Kenneth. Though he lived in Oklahoma City, he and his wife kept horses and cattle on a ranch outside Girty, and Kenneth often made the 120-mile drive to check on the livestock and maintain the property. Kenneth Sumner was well known in both communities. In Oklahoma City, he was described as dependable, intelligent, and witty, traits that carried over to his life in the country. He had a reputation as a bit of a prankster, someone who could deliver a deadpan joke with convincing seriousness. Friends described him as a man who enjoyed the outdoors, took pride in his ranch, and carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence typical of men who worked the land. He was also known to carry 2 firearms in his vehicle for protection on the rural roads and around the ranch, standard practice in that part of the state. When Kenneth left Oklahoma City that day in his brown 1975 Ford F-150, no one suspected it would be the last time anyone would ever see him. By the next morning, he had vanished without a trace, his truck, his guns, and his body never found. What happened in that short window of time remains one of Oklahoma's most enduring mysteries. At approximately 2 p.m. on April 24th, Kenneth stopped at the home of a female friend in Girty. The conversation was short, friendly, and seemingly uneventful, except for one remark. As he turned to leave, Kenneth reportedly said, "This is the last time you will ever see me." Coming from anyone else, that sentence might have raised alarm. But from Kenneth, it was assumed to be another example of his trademark dry humor. The woman didn't think much of it at the time. But when Kenneth never returned home, and days turned into weeks with no sign of him, those words took on a haunting weight. What no one realized at the time was that Kenneth Sumner's trip to Girty coincided with a violent prison escape from the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, a major maximum security facility located just 50 miles east. On April 23, 1978, the day before Sumner disappeared, two highly dangerous convicts, Claude Eugene Dennis, age 35, and Michael Charles Lancaster, 26, made a brazen escape from the penitentiary by tunneling under the wall. Their breakout was well-planned and executed with military precision. Once outside the walls, the two men made their way to a nearby residential property where a prison guard lived with his family. Armed and desperate, Dennis and Lancaster broke into the house, held the family hostage, and stole food, clothing, weapons, and the family's yellow Datsun vehicle. Thankfully, the family was left unharmed. The two fugitives vanished into the Oklahoma countryside, and a statewide manhunt was launched. But for the next 5 days, the escapees seemed to disappear completely. It wasn't until April 29th, 5 days after Kenneth disappeared, that Dennis and Lancaster resurfaced. And when they did, they struck with deadly force. Near Farmersville, Texas, the duo murdered a fisherman without provocation. It was the beginning of a bloody, month-long crime spree that would stretch across Oklahoma, Texas, and Alabama and leave 8 people dead, including 3 law enforcement officers. Over the next 4 weeks, Dennis and Lancaster continued their murderous rampage, robbing stores, stealing vehicles, and gunning down anyone who got in their way. The crime spree came to a violent end in Caddo, Oklahoma, in late May, when both men were killed in a shootout with law enforcement. But shortly after their deaths, an unsettling discovery was made, one that brought the case back to jury and raised disturbing questions about Kenneth Sumner's fate. In June of 1978, about a month after the fugitives were killed, the yellow Datsun stolen from the prison guard's family on the night of the escape was found abandoned in a heavily wooded area behind a barn in Jurdy, Oklahoma, just a short distance from Sumner's ranch. It was a stunning revelation. Could Dennis and Lancaster have passed through Jurdy in the hours or days after their escape? Could they have crossed paths with Kenneth Sumner at the ranch or on the road that afternoon? Was it possible that Kenneth, aware of their presence, was trying to subtly communicate his fear when he said, "This is the last time you'll see me"? The theory gained traction quickly. One of the most perplexing aspects of the case was the total disappearance of Kenneth's pickup truck. His brown Ford F-150, along with the 2 firearms he was known to carry, were never recovered. In fact, no trace of Kenneth's belongings has ever been found. In 1978, vehicle tracking was virtually non-existent, and rural Oklahoma was filled with countless backroads, abandoned barns, and thick wooded areas, ideal terrain to hide a vehicle or dispose of evidence. If the escaped convicts killed Kenneth and stole his truck, it's possible they used it to drive into Texas, where they killed the fisherman. Some investigators believed this scenario made more sense than the fugitives continuing to travel in the bright yellow Datsun, a car that was both easily identifiable and connected to a high-profile prison break. And yet, there's no definitive proof linking Dennis or Lancaster to Kenneth Sumner's disappearance. No fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitnesses. The discovery of the abandoned Datsun near Jurdy is compelling circumstantial evidence, but remains circumstantial. While the fugitive theory is the most widely discussed, law enforcement also explored another angle in Kenneth's case, a possible dispute with neighbors over fencing. Details about the conflict are limited, but it's been reported that Kenneth may have been involved in a disagreement over property lines or land access near the Jurdy Ranch. Given how rural disputes can occasionally spiral into violence, especially when weapons and tempers are involved, it's plausible that Kenneth could have encountered hostility from someone local. But again, no arrests were ever made, and no suspects were publicly named in connection to that theory. It's also worth noting that Kenneth was known to carry cash when traveling to the ranch, enough to make him a potential target for robbery. But if that was the motive, nothing was left behind. As the years passed, Kenneth Sumner's disappearance slipped into the shadows of local memory, becoming one of those stories people remember in fragments. The ranch sat quiet, his truck never found, and the mystery surrounding his last words lingered like an echo. In 2007, nearly 30 years after he vanished, Kenneth Sumner was declared legally dead. But for those who knew him, and those who have studied his case, the sense of closure remains elusive. His name appears on missing persons databases, and his file remains open, though cold. No body to bury, no grave to visit, just a chilling sentence. This is the last time you'll ever see me, and a truck that rolled into town one spring afternoon and was never seen again. When 47-year-old Bill Dwayne Shipley left his rural Oklahoma home in July 2011, he intended to chase work, not vanish. A self-employed painter with a reputation for reliability and a strong work ethic, Bill often took on contracts that kept him away from home for weeks. To those who knew him, a stretch of silence wasn't all that unusual. But this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't just quiet, he was gone. And what was left behind in his trailer was no longer the beginning of a new job. It was the start of a mystery. What happened to Bill Shipley? Who was the man captured on camera using his credit card? And why, more than a decade later, has no one been able to find him? This is the story of the 2011 disappearance of Bill Dwayne Shipley, one of Oklahoma's most disturbing cold cases. Bill Dwayne Shipley was born on March 19, 1964, in Cleveland County, Oklahoma. Described by family as kind, private, and deeply loyal, Bill wasn't one for crowds or attention. He lived a quiet life in Goldsby, a small, rural town outside Norman, where he worked as a contract painter. Bill's home was a modest trailer tucked back on Atkins Road, surrounded by wide-open fields. It was the kind of place where people waved at neighbors, and missing mail might mean it blew away in the wind. He had no wife or children, but he was close to his parents, William and Patricia, and his younger sister, Valerie. They knew he wasn't the type to call every day, but he always stayed in touch before hitting the road for work. In July of 2011, Bill was gearing up for a multi-state painting job. He had contracts lined up with Arby's to paint several restaurant locations in Kansas, Arkansas, and Missouri. According to his family, it was a gig he was excited about. The timeline of Bill's last known activities is both clear and haunting. The final confirmed contact was a phone call with his parents on July 15, 2011. He seemed upbeat, going over plans for his upcoming job. He was scheduled to leave town around July 19th. On that day, July 19th, a string of important and suspicious events occurred. Morning, Bill visited his bank in Goldsby and withdrew between $3,000 and $4,000 in cash, leaving a balance of over $7,000. He then stopped at a paint store in Norman, spending around $3,000 on red and white paint and supplies for the Arby's job. Around 5 p.m., Bill made one last known outgoing phone call on his cell phone. Authorities have never confirmed who he called or what was discussed. Later that evening, he was spotted on surveillance footage at a Sonic drive-in near the Riverwind Casino. He was seen driving his red 2002 Chevy S14 pickup, and, crucially, he was not alone. An unidentified white male was in the passenger seat. Bill ordered his usual drink, an iced tea with lemon. But a second drink, a watermelon slushie, was also purchased. Bill's family insists he would never drink something like that. It was an early clue. Someone else was definitely with him. That Sonic cup was later found inside his trailer. Then Bill vanished. It wasn't until August 14, 2011, nearly a full month later, that anyone went to check on Bill. His family, thinking he was traveling for work, hadn't been alarmed. But when the calls went unanswered for weeks, they drove to his home. What they found changed everything. The front door was unlocked, something Bill never did. The power was shut off. Food had rotted in the fridge. Inside, it looked like someone had rifled through his belongings. Drawers were dumped, clothes scattered, and a suitcase lay neatly packed on the bed, untouched. His laptop and painting gear were gone. So were both of his trucks, a 1988 red Jeep Comanche and his 2002 red Chevy S14. Most chilling of all, Bill's cat was still inside, barely alive, starved, and without water. His family called the McLean County Sheriff's Office immediately. A missing person investigation was opened, and detectives quickly determined that Bill had not left voluntarily. Neighbors reported something strange. They saw both of Bill's trucks, first the Jeep, then the Chevy, parked at his property days after he was supposed to have left. But then, one at a time, they disappeared. Where they ended up became a major part of the investigation. August 20th, 2011, the Jeep Comanche is found. The Jeep was discovered abandoned at the Brookwood Village Apartments, roughly 20 miles north in South Oklahoma City. Inside were some of Bill's belongings, but his painting equipment was gone. -2 airless paint sprayers, worth over $1,000 each, were missing. Ladders, lighting equipment, and paint cans, all gone. There are no signs of violence, no blood, and no usable evidence. August 14th, 2012, exactly 1 year later, the Chevy S14 was found, abandoned at a different complex, East Lake Village Apartments, less than 3 miles from where the Jeep had been located. The vehicle was processed thoroughly for hair, fibers, fingerprints, but no significant evidence was recovered. 2 trucks, dumped in different locations, weeks apart, both with vital clues missing. Perhaps the most startling clue in the entire case surfaced shortly after Bill was reported missing. His credit card, which hadn't been used since July 19th, suddenly resurfaced in early August, just days before his family called the police. August 12th, 2011. The card is used. Someone used Bill's card at 3 separate businesses: A. Murphy USA gas station in Norman, a Saltgrass Steakhouse, also in Norman, a depot in Oklahoma City. Each time, surveillance cameras caught the same man, white male, approximately 6 feet 2 inches, 250 pounds, with a large stomach, dressed in tan overalls, a white shirt, brown work boots, and a green John Deere hat. Light-colored hair and light eyes. Police released still images and a composite sketch. But despite national circulation and multiple tips, the man was never identified. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. The card was never used again. To this day, the disappearance of Bill Shipley remains one of Oklahoma's most baffling cases. But several theories have emerged. 1. Robbery gone wrong. Bill was known to carry large sums of cash. He may have withdrawn nearly $4,000 the day he disappeared. Did someone see him flash money at the bank or paint store and follow him? But if it was a robbery, why leave behind other valuables like his laptop and work gear? 2. Someone he knew, the unidentified passenger at Sonic hints at someone Bill was comfortable with. Around that time, Bill had posted a Craigslist ad looking for a painting assistant. Could he have hired someone who turned on him? 3. A calculated murder. The lack of forced entry at the trailer and the way both trucks were abandoned quietly points to someone familiar with Bill and his routines. The delayed credit card use, just before the family contacted police, suggests the killer might have known they were running out of time. Bill's sister, Valerie, maintains active communication with law enforcement and pushes for his story to remain in the public eye. They have even prepared a grave for him, though his remains have never been found. On the headstone, they inscribed his favorite quote, "I would rather walk with God in the dark than go alone in the light." After 13 years, the pain has not faded. The questions remain just as sharp. There are still so many unanswered questions. Who was the man in the passenger seat at Sonic? Why did the credit card thief stop using the card the moment police were alerted? Was Bill lured to his death under the pretense of work? Why take both of Bill's trucks, only to dump them in different locations? Authorities believe more than one person may be involved, and someone, somewhere, still knows exactly what happened to Bill Shipley. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the McLean County Sheriff's Office at 527-2411 or Oklahoma City Crime Stoppers at 235-7300. In early October 2007, 36-year-old Manuel Salado returned home to Oklahoma City after completing Army Reserve basic training. By all accounts, it should have been a moment of pride and celebration. He had just completed a major milestone, one that many would find physically and mentally grueling. It was a turning point in his life, a chance to build a stronger foundation for his family and provide a better future for his young daughter. But just days after returning home, Manuel vanished, without his phone, his passport, his identification, or any money. Most telling of all, he left behind the daughter he loved more than anything. What began as a troubling case of a missing husband quickly spiraled into one of the most disturbing murder investigations Oklahoma City police had ever seen, marked by cryptic internet searches, missing bullets, whispered confessions, and a body that, to this day, has never been found. Manuel Salado was last seen on October 8, 2007. His wife, 36-year-old Exania J. Salado, would later tell police that Manuel came home from his training in the Army Reserve and abruptly left again several days later. But something about her story didn't sit right, not with Manuel's family, not with his friends, and eventually, not with law enforcement. Manuel was deeply committed to his responsibilities in the Army Reserve, and when he failed to report for scheduled drills that following weekend, alarm bells rang. This wasn't the kind of man who simply disappeared. Concerned parties reported him missing shortly afterward. Investigators arrived at the Salado residence and immediately found signs that contradicted Exandia's version of events. All of Manuel's essential personal items, his cell phone, checkbook, credit cards, passport, military ID, and driver's license, had been left behind. He hadn't taken anything with him that someone planning a voluntary disappearance would typically take. And perhaps most troubling of all, he had left behind his young daughter. That detail alone sent a chilling message. The investigation took a darker turn when police searched the home more thoroughly. Inside, they discovered a box of bullets, 6 of them missing. It was a seemingly small but ominous detail that would later take on horrifying significance. As detectives began speaking with Manuel's inner circle, they discovered something chilling. Just before he vanished, Manuel had confided in a close friend that he was terrified of his wife. He said he believed Exandia was trying to kill him. He was so shaken that he initially asked to stay the night with his friend, but after a phone call with Exandia, he suddenly changed his mind and returned home. It was the last time anyone ever saw him alive. For more than a year, the case stalled. There was no body, no forensic evidence of a crime scene, only suspicions and a string of unsettling details. But everything changed in December 2008 when Exania Salado was arrested in Florida and charged with the murder of her husband. The evidence that led to her arrest was nothing short of macabre. Investigators gained access to Exandia's computer and discovered an internet search history that could make even the most hardened detectives pause. She had searched for terms including how to dispose of a human body recipes for human body consumption how to build a barbecue pit how a body decomposes. These were not random, one-time searches. They formed a pattern, methodical, calculated, and undeniably connected to Manuel's disappearance. Then came the confessions. Exania allegedly told not one, but 2 people about what she had done. She said she had shot Manuel to death in their home, placed his body into a large plastic container, kept it in the apartment for several days, and then transported it to a property outside of Oklahoma City. There, she said, she burned his remains on an outdoor grill. By the time police learned this, it was too late to recover physical evidence. The site where she reportedly incinerated Manuel's body had long since been cleaned up. Despite exhaustive efforts, no remains were ever found. But prosecutors believed they had enough to build a compelling case. And in April 2011, they brought Exandia to trial. At trial, the prosecution laid out a meticulous case, weaving together Manuel's last known movements, the disturbing internet history, the missing bullets, and the alleged confessions. They painted a portrait of a woman who had grown increasingly resentful of her husband, possibly jealous, paranoid, or threatened by his growing independence and time away from home. The defense, however, leaned hard into a different narrative. They argued that Manuel Salado wasn't dead at all. According to Exandia's attorney, he had willingly vanished and returned to his birth country, the Dominican Republic, to reunite with another woman. They claimed his disappearance was voluntary, perhaps even premeditated, and insisted that without a body, the state couldn't prove a murder had even occurred. But the jury wasn't convinced. It wasn't just that Manuel had left all his belongings behind. It wasn't just the search history. It wasn't even the confessions, though they played a key role. It was the complete lack of any trace of Manuel Salado, no communication, no activity, no life, after October 8, 2007. For someone with responsibilities in the military and a close bond with his daughter, vanishing into thin air simply didn't make sense. On April 27, 2011, Exandria J. Salado was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, Manuel Salado's body has never been recovered. For his family, the pain of that reality lingers. They were denied the opportunity to bury their loved one, denied the answers to what exactly happened after he returned home that final time, and denied the ability to say goodbye. The story of Manuel Salado stands as a chilling reminder that even without a body, justice can be pursued. But it also underscores the dark and disturbing truth about some domestic violence cases. When fear is dismissed, when cries for help go unheeded, and when love becomes twisted into something deadly. Manuel had told someone he thought his wife was trying to kill him. He had a chance to escape, but he went home anyway. No one ever saw him again. Tulsa, Oklahoma, February 1985, when 27-year-old Terry Schlatter walked out of her Tulsa apartment one winter morning with her young son Nathan. No one could have known it would be the last time either of them was ever seen again. Terry and her husband Daryl Schlatter had a complicated and troubled history, one woven with deception, crime, and abuse. Terry, originally from Indiana, had become entangled with Daryl years earlier. Though outwardly charismatic, Daryl harbored dark secrets. He had assumed a false identity, using a dead man's name and social security number to engage in financial fraud. By the time Terry met him, he was already immersed in criminal activity, and she was about to become his unwilling accomplice. The couple's relationship was rocky from the start, punctuated by manipulation, control, and brushes with the law. They eventually settled in Tulsa, trying to build a life, but they were constantly shadowed by the consequences of their criminal behavior. The law eventually caught up to them in the early 1980s when both were charged with federal bank fraud. The charges stemmed from a boat loan Terry had taken out. Investigators learned that Daryl had dyed his hair gray and posed as Terry's father to co-sign for the loan, one of many deceptions the couple allegedly committed. When Terry fell behind on payments, authorities began looking more closely into her finances, uncovering a web of lies that stretched across state lines. Fearing legal repercussions, Terry fled Oklahoma before the indictment was finalized. She was eventually located in Colorado, where she had found work as an exotic dancer. Her attempt to disappear didn't last long. She was arrested on prostitution charges, and when authorities discovered her outstanding warrant in Oklahoma, she was extradited back to Tulsa. Facing serious charges, Terry made a pivotal decision. She agreed to cooperate with investigators and testify against her husband, Daryl. The move marked a turning point, one that would ultimately cost her and her son their lives. In January 1985, as she prepared for her court appearances and attempted to stabilize her life, Terry sent her young son, Nathan, to live with her mother and stepfather in Springville, Indiana. She told her family it would only be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. But in February, Terry returned to Indiana to collect her son, despite her parents' objections. They were concerned for both Terry and Nathan's safety, but she was insistent. She took Nathan back to Tulsa. Her mother later recalled that Terry seemed determined to start fresh, and while the decision worried them, they hoped for the best. The day after picking up Nathan, Terry phoned her mother to ask about some of his medication. It was a brief, routine call, the kind that didn't seem unusual at the time. But as it would turn out, it was the last time anyone in her family would ever hear from her again. Not long after that final phone call, Terry dropped Nathan off at a babysitter's house for the day. Hours later, Daryl arrived unexpectedly and told the sitter that her services would no longer be needed. He took Nathan and left. Terry never came back to pick up her son, and no one, not family, not friends, not law enforcement, has seen or heard from either Terry or Nathan Schlatter since. At first, authorities treated Terry as a fugitive. Given her pending fraud charges and her history of fleeing, it was easy for law enforcement to assume she had simply run again. But her family didn't buy it. They insisted she would never have abandoned her son or cut off all contact with them. As time passed, their suspicions grew darker. They knew Terry had previously tried to leave Daryl, and each time, he had tracked her down. But after February 1985, Daryl made no effort to find his missing wife and child. He never filed a police report. He never called her family. He simply acted as if Terry and Nathan had never existed. Still, with no bodies, no physical evidence, and an active federal indictment hanging over Terry's name, authorities hesitated to list her as a missing person. Her case languished for years, largely ignored. That all changed in 1992. In September of that year, Daryl's girlfriend, 29-year-old Erica Hartwick, was found dead under highly suspicious circumstances. Daryl claimed she had been horseback riding, gotten her heel caught in a stirrup, and been tragically dragged to death. But the forensic evidence told a different story. Erica had been murdered. In April 1993, Daryl was formally charged with Hartwick's murder. The case against him was strong enough to prompt investigators to re-examine the disappearance of Terry and Nathan Schlatter. This time, they treated it as a possible double homicide. Search teams were dispatched to drain a pond near one of Daryl's former properties, hoping to recover remains. But nothing was found. The mystery deepened, and the pressure on Daryl mounted. Then, in June 1993, Daryl Schlatter was found dead in his jail cell. He had hanged himself, taking with him whatever secrets he held about the fate of Terry and Nathan. In the years since, the case has remained unsolved. Investigators believe foul play is the only reasonable explanation. Neither Terry nor Nathan's social security numbers have ever been used again. No bank activity, no paper trail, no sightings. It's as if they vanished into thin air. Terry's family, especially her mother, have never stopped searching for answers. They believe Daryl murdered Terry to prevent her from testifying against him, and that Nathan was killed simply because he witnessed it or to ensure he couldn't be used as leverage. With Daryl gone, the truth may never fully come to light. But those closest to Terry still hold out hope that someone, somewhere, might know something and might finally come forward. Until then, Terry and Nathan Schlatter remain among Oklahoma's most haunting missing persons cases, a mother and son who vanished in the shadow of betrayal, buried secrets, and a killer who evaded justice until the very end.